Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much. Oh, this is beautiful. Cool. Let me see if I can get this to work. Can you hear me? Yeah, cool. Thank you for coming on a Friday afternoon. That's pretty cool to see so many people. People in London would be drunk by now in the pub somewhere. So I'll be talking about navigating tech with a business mindset and why my talk is called that. I will come into that later. So as Daniel said, exactly, I'm studying at King's College in London, where I'm pursuing my bachelor's degree in politics, philosophy, and economics. Philosophy doesn't have the best brand here in Denmark, but I will try to talk a bit more about why I think I can contribute with something about tech anyway. In a couple of months, I'll be heading to Singapore, because if they're good at economics, someplace that would be Singapore, Asia in general. So I'm heading over there to study half a year soon. As you can see, the study background is not really shouting technology. Some of you would probably have a much more relevant background for this talk than I have. So the reason why I've been invited here is because I've been lucky to work with a McKinsey company and specifically a project or study with Digital McKinsey this summer. So I interned with them for 2 months and I worked with a big Danish client in the T&L space who were going through a digital transformation. Before then, I worked in New York for 2 months at a blockchain startup called BlockTech that were launching one of these ICOs that you've probably heard of if you're following the news at the moment. So got some experience there as well. And then lastly, I have some experience from my gap year where I worked for 8 months in London for a company called Nova Founders Capital, founded by a former CBS alumni, or 2 of them actually. So I have some experience there as well because Nova is focusing specifically on fintech companies. So I won't be talking about coding much today, but rather how you can actually navigate this space without needing to code. But before we jump too much in it, how many of you guys are actually studying something tech-related? Cool. And how many of you guys would like to work in tech? It's a bit more. Awesome. Cool. And how many of you would like to be management consultants? A couple? Cool. How many of you would like to be investment bankers? Banks? Finance? 1? Cool. All right. So for you, it's probably not too relevant, this one, because banking, you're pretty fucked if you don't know technology today. So this is Goldman's job postings. Nearly 50% of the jobs are already in technology, and that will change soon. So the bankers will end up without a job because this guy has taken over their job. So for the bankers here, I don't think that you will ever be smarter than a computer in terms of doing math. So in that space, I don't think this talk might be really relevant. For the rest of you, this might be relevant. Because this talk is basically built up around one big assumption, and that assumption is that you're not going to learn to code. If we were to put up the calculation and look at our future income and how cool our job is in the future, I'm sure that most of us would figure out that if we were to learn to code, both the income would rise and the job might be cooler as well. So it's pretty weird that we're not learning to code then. And why are we not learning to code? So for me, I think it's because it's just not interesting for me. I know that pragmatically I should probably learn to code, but I'm not doing it because I'd rather do the business side of things. And I think we have to get into a mindset where we're not thinking of coding as something that everyone can just sit down, learn, and then do. Because it's not you're never going to succeed too much if you're just mediocre at a thing. So if you like business, why start coding if you'll never get the best at coding, really? And if you want to do the basics, there's already pretty good tools out there. So have you ever tried Upwork? It's basically just a website where you can go in, find someone who can do your stuff for you. So find some guy in Singapore who could do your code, build it. Squarespace, the logo in the middle that we cannot see right now, is a website where you can go in and create your own beautiful website in whatever 2 hours. And if you'd like to create an app without writing one single line of code, you can go to Bubble. So really, the basics are covered. You don't really need to code to build a startup today. Where you need to code is if you're going in and launching a product, for example, where you need to actually dive into the things. And I don't think that unless you're really passionate about coding, that you'll actually take on those skills and build the profile that is necessary to actually achieve a solid product. I think it's much easier and much better for you guys to stay where you're passionate and then find someone to work with who can figure out and are passionate about the coding side of things. That being said, Tech skills are more like than coding, and tech is everywhere today. It's in banking, it's in consulting, it's at the big companies, and every company is really turning into a technology company. Even like simple, like masonry is like turning into a technology company, because now whatever your electrician would ask you whether you'd like some financing option through the app that he brought along. Code, like tech, is everywhere. So you need to be able to do stuff with these people. So I'd like to talk a bit about like what I think that you should learn if you'd like to navigate in this space with a business mindset. I'd like to talk a bit about where to learn that, where to accumulate those skills, how to get them really. So like how do you actually obtain these skills? Who do you talk to? How do you get these like clever people to talk to you as well? And then lastly, give just a couple of examples of what I've been doing at the 3 companies where I've been lucky to work in some technology like focused roles. All right. So the first thing that I think is really important when you're navigating in the tech space with a business mindset is to learn the lingo. So Daniel touched upon it in his introduction. If you don't know what an API is today, you're pretty fucked. If you don't know what a Scrum team is, you cannot really work in a tech company either. So I think like incrementally, if you just want to take part in a company, if you'd like the acceptance of the tech people, the people that in reality are just much smarter than us like business people, then you need to learn the lingo. Get to know it and figure out what they're saying, because if you don't understand them, you're never going to pick up the necessary skills, right? Second thing is like to know the tools that these business people are using, or these tech people are using. So if you don't know Slack yet, like shame on you. You need to figure out what Slack is, and if you're ever going to launch a student society or something like that, like use Slack to communicate on instead of Facebook. Slack is the communications tool for the at least these years right now. It's an awesome way of communicating. Another couple of tools that you need to know is like Trello, like a classic Scrum, Sprint, like agile way of working kind of project management board. So get to know these tools. I'm not going through all of them today. I don't think that's relevant really, but rather just give that piece of advice. So if you join a company and you see that these people are keep posting code on GitHub, at least figure out what GitHub is, how you get access to it, and how you might be able to share it, like get access or something like that, so that you can take that into account when navigating in the business. And the last thing, and that's probably the most important thing, that is to know how these tech people are working. So there's a big, revolutionary change in terms of how people are working today and how they worked 10 years ago. So from coming from a standard business background, we're used to the fact that we have a boss, and that boss will tell us what to do. Then we'll figure that out, do the job, come back to him. We might over-deliver, but we'll never do it other ways, like the other way around. Tech is the other way around now. People in tech are working agile. That basically means that instead of being told what to do, they will have a big chunk, a backlog of things that they'd like to do. So the company, the business people, have basically prioritized all these things that needs to be done for their product to be live. But it's always up to the tech people, to the Scrum teams, to choose what to do, when to do it, and plan the sprints. So get into the mindset of suddenly having the tech team taking control over the product. They will be the ones pulling in from the backlog and choosing what tasks to do when they should be done and so forth. Go from this active delegating role into a much more passive mindset, where your role is to prioritize and basically help the tech team as much as possible. Because again, the tech team will be in the driving seat. They will be the ones that needs to succeed in order for the product to be built. If you're good at marketing, it doesn't help if the product is not ready, because you cannot really market anything if you don't have the product ready. So get into the mindset that the big bottleneck here is the tech team, and your role as a business people until the product is launched is to sustain and help them as much as possible on the way. So to sum that up, simply, I think these 5 things, if you know those, then you're pretty far ahead actually. So the first thing is to be able to communicate a task. You need to be able to translate business into nerd, and you need to be able to translate nerd into business back again. So I tried this at my job in New York, where I worked with investor relations. So I was trying to sell something. That's my former colleague up there from New York. So I tried to sell technology to business people, but the CTO we had in our company didn't speak English. He spoke nerd. He was super smart, and the things were made good sense, but they worked in his mind, and they worked as code when they came out of his fingers. But really translating it into English, understanding what the core parts were, that was super difficult for him to communicate. So really like go in and understand the task and be able to communicate that task. That's really important. Second step is to understand the process. So figure out in the end, like, and that is super difficult, how long does it take to like develop a task? From a business background, again, sometimes you think that something like whatever, a small task would take a developer 3 minutes to do. And in the end, it might take him 15 hours because there's some problem with whatever, the API call or something like that. And the other way around, sometimes you think that a big chunk of tasks would take a developer 15 hours, but in reality, he can do it in 3 minutes because he found some quick way around it. If you don't understand the process, if you don't have a pretty solid idea of how long it takes to do the different tasks, then you're never going to succeed if you'd like to work in a startup with some business people. Because the business people, the tech people are smart. The tech people will, of course, do it as good as they can. But in the end, like, you need to understand what they're doing in order for you to go in and co-work with them and take control over that. And that follows into the third point. So you need to be able to also prioritize the tech side of things. You need to understand what is important from the tech side, and you need to be able to put that into the sprints, so the different small, like two-week work streams, and figure out like what is important right now, what is important in the future, and basically be able to combine the tech side of things with the business side of things. If you're not able to do that, again, like, your product or startup would just not like succeed. And the last thing I think is important is to understand blockers. So again, blockers come from the whole Scrum way of working. And basically, blockers is a blocking thing, a thing that is holding back your tech team into succeeding. If you can, as a business person, solve these blockers, then you're saving yourself a lot of money and a lot of time. So again, get into the mindset that you're in the world right now to help these tech people succeed, to build the product. And if you understand and can help the tech people solve their blockers, then you're pretty far ahead. All right? Second step, so where to learn it. I think it doesn't really matter. What I think is that you should try to learn it in different spaces. So whether that is like, so that's a New York office, so whether you work with a cool startup, or whether you work with McKinsey, so like the partner Lars I work with, like, those are just stock photos. We didn't have such a cool office in New York. But like, it doesn't really matter where you work. The important thing is to try out both things. So the way we worked with tech and McKinsey was very structured, very streamlined, and these people were like experts in what they were doing. They had 10 years of experience, and they knew what to do when. So in that sense, that was a pretty non-bullshitty environment where people knew what they were doing, and thus also, like, you were the very, 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 very junior guy who shouldn't actually like suggest too many things, but rather just observe and understand what they were doing. But that's also an environment where you make fewer of the mistakes, and we all know that you really learn from mistakes. And if there's one place where people make mistakes all the time, that's in a startup. So like, try to join a startup and see how that works in that space as well. And I think like the best advice to give in terms of where to accumulate these skills is to really try out both sides of the aisle. Try to work both in a very structured environment with a lot of smart people, where you might be very stupid compared to the other people in the company. But it's also really cool if you can get into a startup and actually be part of driving the process. The next step is like how to learn it. So like, first thing is to just observe. If you're coming into a tech company again with no tech skills whatsoever, that was my story when I joined like Block Tech in New York. I had never seen blockchain technology before. I didn't know shit about Solidity. I knew that there was something called Bitcoin, and it was pretty valuable, and sometimes it was not as valuable anyway, and then it was very valuable like 4 hours later again. That was what I knew. So go into those companies with an open mind and basically start like observing, what are these people saying, how are they doing it, how are they communicating with each other. Understand those things, and then start to ask the questions, like, go in and like if you join the stand-up in the morning, so stand-up is usually like a 15-minute meeting in every morning of a tech team. If you join that and go in and just observe what they're saying, so you get an idea of the agenda of the tech things right now, then you can start asking the questions afterwards. And then like where you really learn is when you try to try it yourself. So take on some role where you need to actually perform tech stuff. Again, it shouldn't be coding, because you're not going to learn to code. So focus on the things where you can actually learn the structural parts or something like that. So an example that I did was to basically map the whole network, the ecosystem of some of the stuff that we did in New York. So while this might seem super complex, it really isn't when you sat down, asked the tech people the questions, And this was basically one of the translations from Nerd to English that we had to make in order for us to showcase to our investors what we were doing. And like, this might seem complex as well, but if you just have it in code, it's even more complex. So like, these like advice are not like rocket science, right? So go in, observe in the first place, accept that you're the dumbest person in the room. If you don't get to that realization, then you're never going to be to get to the next step, which is to start asking the right questions. And when you have asked the right questions, you should start trying out some things yourself. Throw yourself into it. Again, get a lot of feedback on that. And if you're able to do that, then over time you will accumulate a lot of these skills and be able to ask the better questions, take on bigger tasks, and in the end actually get to learn how to like work with tech even though you don't have any tech background. All right, so there's quite a lot of ways of like accumulating these skills. I will give a few examples of how I've tried to learn this that might not be relevant for you at all. Some of you have already a tech background. That was pretty cool. For me, I didn't have anything. So like, this is a very, very basic way of trying to accumulate some of these skills. So the first good advice is to take part in the recruiting process. Not to sit in and interview tech people, because again, you're not smart enough to do that. But one of the things that I did when I worked for Nova Founders was to actually just source the candidates on LinkedIn. So go to LinkedIn, find people that worked in the right tech environment, so the right stack. And through that, I learned what the difference from a backend and a front-end developer is, what a developer should need to know if he were to use the mean stack to develop something, what different programming languages are relevant for front-end development, what programming languages are relevant for back-end development, what is a database developer, and so forth. So like, all these things are really easy to pick up if you join the recruiting process and start understanding what kind of skill sets are needed for what kind of tasks. If you understand that, then you're in a very, very good position to launch a tech company yourself at some point. Because you need to know what person is the right person for a specific task, right? The next good idea is to join these nerdy meetings. So go in and accept already at the beginning of a meeting that you're not going to understand 50% of what's being said at this meeting because it's too complex for you. But back to the whole observe and ask part, if you start joining these nerdy meetings that might not make sense for you to join if you're just being pragmatic about your time, then you will actually start to maybe pick up just a bit of it and start understanding what is the progress of our tech right now. And if you understand that part, then you can integrate it into the rest of what you're doing. And that is usually a pretty good idea. And it will also, a side benefit is that you get to network with these people and actually work directly together with the tech people. Because one thing that is true in big companies as well today is that the tech guys and the business guys are too far away from each other, which is really stupid. Because these guys should be working together as much as possible. And a good way of getting into that mindset is to actually just join these nerdy meetings. Another piece of advice is to ask for time with these people. They might be the geeky guy in the corner listening to weird music, usually very, very hard metal rock, with long hair, maybe a bit dirty hair as well. But that guy is smart, and that guy can teach you a lot. So go into the mindset that you need to actually get time with these people. You need to try to speak with them, and if you can book them for 15 minutes and get them to go through the basics, the structure of the code that they've been writing this day, or if you can get them to explain why they've spent 15 hours on something that you thought would take them 10 minutes, then you're starting to pick up, again, some of these different tech skills that are really important. So I think that is a really important thing as well. But the best advice, obviously, is to join a tech startup. It might be that you end up looking like that guy and being pretty frustrated about things, because, again, startups fail all the time, both in the everyday and as a whole company. Companies go under. But nevertheless, that is an amazing environment to learn about this kind of stuff because there's so much stuff to do. So as soon as you have the drive, the energy, and you have the time, then there's loads of things you should do. It's just to take on tasks, take ownership of the tasks, and that's a great opportunity to learn in these environments, while working for a big company will definitely limit the different amounts of tasks that you can take on, but also what sorts of tasks you can take on. Because you'll have a boss telling you, hey, dude, Emil, you're not smart enough to do that, so go do whatever, the Excel model instead, and then let the tech people work on the structure of the tech, right? So if you're in a tech company, the founders or the CEO of the company would always love if you come with passion and say, hey, I'd like to help out with that task. You might fuck it up for the first 3 times. In the end, he might take you off the task because you're messing things up more than you're helping. But the 3rd time, hopefully, you should know what to do. And if you know that, that's a great idea. So like where to find these jobs in Denmark, you should go to the hub if you haven't tried that out already. I think they have like, 800 jobs in startups. And that guy would like to hire you as well, it seems like. So if you'd like to go to New York and do some tech stuff with blockchain, you could speak to Peter as well. Another great place is obviously LinkedIn. But like, don't be the weird guy saying, I'm interested in connecting and learning more about you. Because those guys are just like fucking like idiots. So think about how you're introducing yourself to people on LinkedIn. Practice it a bit maybe. There's a lot of job opportunities if you use LinkedIn in the right way, but don't be too bullshitty about it. But if you're not too bullshitty, it's a great tool. All right? That's for me. I hope to speak to you later. Okay. Thanks.